My name is Harold Bennett. I am 68 years old, a retired forensic accountant living in the sun-bleached suburbs of Scottsdale, Arizona. For 3 years since my son David passed from a sudden heart attack, my daughter-in-law and my grandson have been my only remaining family. That's why I never questioned our weekly Wednesday lunches. That's why I never suspected a thing. Last Wednesday, while I was sitting across from my grandson at his favorite burger joint, my phone buzzed with an alert from my home security system. Someone had just disarmed my alarm and entered through the back door. My grandson saw me look at my phone, saw the color drain from my face, and before I could even speak, he let out a laugh that made my blood run cold. It wasn't a laugh of surprise. It was the high-pitched, desperate laugh of a young man watching his carefully laid plans begin to unravel. And in that moment, I realized that the greatest threat to my future wasn't a stranger breaking into my home. It was sitting right across from me, picking at his French fries. What he didn't know was that he was laughing at a man who had spent 40 years following the money. And the money always tells the truth. The restaurant was loud with the clatter of dishes and the hum of conversation, but all I could hear was the echo of my grandson Tyler's laugh. He was 24 years old, fresh out of college, and for the past 3 years, he had been the closest thing I had to a son. After David died, Tyler had stepped up in ways I never expected. He called me every few days. He helped me with yard work. He sat with me on the anniversary of his father's death and let me tell stories about the man David had been. I loved that boy. I loved him with the desperate, clinging love of a man who had already lost too much. "Grandpa, relax," Tyler said, waving his hand dismissively. His smile was too wide, his eyes too bright. "It's probably just the cleaning lady. Mom said she was sending someone over today to help you out. You know how she worries about you rattling around in that big house all alone." I stared at him. My cleaning lady came on Fridays. She had come on Fridays for the past 12 years. My daughter-in-law Victoria knew this. She had been the one to recommend her after David died. "Your mother didn't mention anything about sending someone," I said carefully, watching his face. Tyler shrugged, but I caught it, the flicker of something in his eyes. Fear? Guilt? The expression was there and gone in a heartbeat, replaced by that same easy smile. "You know, Mom, she's always trying to help. Probably just forgot to tell you. It's no big deal, Grandpa. Eat your burger." But it was a big deal. I knew it in my bones, in the same way I had known, after 40 years of examining financial records, when a number didn't add up. Something was wrong. The question that haunted me on the drive home wasn't who was in my house. It was why my grandson had laughed. I pulled into my driveway 20 minutes later, my heart hammering against my ribs. The house looked exactly as I had left it. The terracotta pots of succulents on the porch, the American flag hanging limply in the still desert air. The front door was closed, the windows dark against the afternoon sun. Everything was normal. Everything was fine, except it wasn't. I checked the security app on my phone again. The log was clear. Back door disarmed at 12:47 p.m., rearmed at 1:23 p.m. Someone had been inside my house for 36 minutes while I sat across from my grandson eating a cheeseburger. I walked through the front door and stood in the entryway, listening. The house was silent, filled only with the familiar hum of the air conditioning. I moved through each room methodically, the way I used to move through spreadsheets. Living room, clear. Kitchen, clear. My study, where I kept my important papers. I stopped in the doorway. Everything looked normal. My desk was neat, my computer sleeping, my filing cabinet closed. But something was different. The air smelled faintly of perfume. Not Victoria's usual scent, something cheaper, more floral. And on my desk, next to my lamp, was a business card that had not been there that morning. I picked it up with trembling fingers. Sunset Valley Realty. The name on the card was Monica Chen, Senior Agent. On the back, someone had written in blue ink, "Beautiful property. Call me to discuss options." My hands went cold. I had not invited any realtor to my house. I had no intention of selling. This home, this 4-bedroom Pueblo revival that my wife Margaret and I had bought 30 years ago, was where I planned to live until they carried me out in a box. I turned the card over and over in my hands, my mind racing. A realtor had been in my house. Someone had let her in. Someone had shown her around my property while I was conveniently occupied at lunch with my grandson, and that someone had not bothered to tell me. The next morning, I did what I always did when something didn't add up. I followed the money. I sat down at my computer and logged into my primary bank account. The interface loaded, familiar, and comforting. I started with my checking account, scanning the recent transactions. My pension deposit, my utility bills, my weekly grocery run, everything was in order. Then I switched to my savings account. The balance was exactly what I expected. No unusual withdrawals, no strange transfers. I felt a small wave of relief. Maybe I was overreacting. Maybe Tyler was right, and it was all just a misunderstanding. Then I clicked on the account settings, and the relief evaporated like water on hot Arizona asphalt. There, under the section labeled Joint Account Holders, was a name that made my stomach drop. Tyler James Bennett. Added as joint holder on March 15th, 3 months ago. I had not added him. I had not authorized this. I had not even known it was possible to add someone to my account without my signature. But there was his name, giving him full access to every dollar I had saved over a lifetime of careful work. I stared at the screen, my mind struggling to process what I was seeing. This wasn't a clerical error. This was deliberate. Someone had added my grandson to my account, and that someone had access to my personal information, my passwords, my very identity. The paranoid part of my brain, the part that had been honed by 4 decades of catching corporate fraud, whispered a single, terrible question. What else don't you know? I spent the next 2 hours digging. I pulled my credit report, something I hadn't done in years. The page loaded slowly, and when it finally appeared, I felt like I had been punched in the chest. My credit score had dropped by over 150 points. There were inquiries I didn't recognize, hard pulls from lenders I had never contacted, and at the bottom of the report, under new accounts, was an entry that made me physically ill. A home equity line of credit had been opened in my name 6 weeks ago. The lender was a company called Desert Sun Financial. The credit limit was $400,000, and $320,000 of it had already been drawn out. I sat back in my chair, my hands shaking so badly I could barely grip the mouse. Someone had taken out a loan against my house, my fully paid-off house, the house I had owned, free and clear, for the past 8 years. They had borrowed $320,000 against my home, and I hadn't known a thing about it. I scrolled through the documents linked to the account, my vision swimming, and then I saw it. The signature on the application. It was my name, written in a hand that looked almost exactly like mine. The loops were right. The slant was correct. But I knew, in the way you know your own face in a mirror, that I had not signed this document. This was a forgery. A skilled, careful, deliberate forgery. And next to the applicant's signature, in the space reserved for the authorized representative, was another name I recognized. Victoria Ann Bennett. Power of attorney. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. My daughter-in-law had power of attorney over my affairs. She had the legal right to sign documents on my behalf, to access my accounts, to sell my property, and I had given it to her. The memory came rushing back, a flood of guilt and horror. It was about 8 months ago, just after Thanksgiving. Victoria had come over with a bottle of wine and a thick envelope of papers. She had been so kind, so concerned. "Dad," she had said, using the name she had called me since she married David 26 years ago. "I've been talking to my estate planner, and he said we really need to get your affairs in order. You know, just in case something happens. It's just routine paperwork, nothing scary. It'll give me the ability to help you with bills and doctors if you ever need it. You know how complicated Medicare can be." I had been tired that night. I had been lonely. I had been grateful that someone, anyone, still cared about me. So I signed. Page after page, wherever she pointed, barely glancing at the dense legal text. I trusted her. She was my son's widow. She was Tyler's mother. She was family. And she had used that trust to steal everything I had. I did not sleep that night. I lay in my bed, staring at the ceiling, the numbers spinning through my head like a slot machine that wouldn't stop. $320,000. A forged signature. A power of attorney I had signed without reading. I was a forensic accountant. I had spent my career catching people who did exactly what Victoria had done. I had testified in federal court. I had helped put white-collar criminals in prison. And I had been played like a fool by my own daughter-in-law. By morning, the grief and shock had hardened into something else. Something cold and sharp and patient. I was not going to cry. I was not going to rage. I was going to do what I did best. I was going to follow the money, and I was going to destroy her. The first thing I did was call an old colleague, a woman named Patricia Reyes, who had gone into private practice specializing in elder financial abuse. When I told her what I had found, she was silent for a long moment. "Harold," she said finally, her voice tight with controlled anger, "I need you to send me everything, and I need you to act completely normal. Do not confront Victoria. Do not change your locks. Do not do anything that might tip her off. Can you do that?" I told her I could, and for the next 3 weeks, I became the greatest actor in the state of Arizona. I went to Wednesday lunches with Tyler and smiled and asked about his job search. I accepted Victoria's phone calls and let her fuss over me and thanked her for her concern. I sat in her living room and drank her coffee and listened to her talk about her plans for a vacation to Cabo San Lucas. A vacation I now knew that she was planning to pay for with my money. Every moment was agony. Every smile felt like a knife twisting in my gut. But I held the mask in place, because Patricia was building a case that would bring the whole rotten structure crashing down. The investigation revealed a picture far worse than I had imagined. Victoria was not just a thief. She was a desperate woman drowning in debt. Patricia's investigator discovered that she had been gambling for years, ever since David died. Online poker, sports betting, casino trips to Las Vegas that she told everyone were spa weekends with friends. She was hundreds of thousands of dollars in the hole, and the creditors were closing in. My home equity line had been her lifeline. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was Tyler. Patricia's investigator pulled bank records, text messages, security footage from my own cameras that Victoria didn't know existed. Tyler had been in my house the day the realtor visited. He had let her in. He had walked her through the rooms, pointing out the features, discussing the potential sale price. The investigator found a text message from Tyler to Victoria. Sent the morning of our lunch. "He's distracted. Monica's going in now. Should have the comps by tonight." My grandson was not an innocent bystander. He was a co-conspirator. He had been helping his mother sell my house out from under me, while I sat across from him eating a cheeseburger and talking about baseball. The betrayal was so complete, so total, that I could barely breathe when Patricia showed me the evidence. "I know this is painful," Patricia said, her voice gentle, "but we have everything we need. The question now is what you want to do with it." What I wanted was to scream. What I wanted was to drive to Victoria's house and throw the evidence in her face and watch her world collapse. But I was a forensic accountant. I knew that anger was the enemy of justice. So I took a deep breath and asked Patricia to explain my options. "You could file criminal charges," she said. "What Victoria did is textbook elder financial abuse. She's looking at felony forgery, theft, and fraud. She could get real prison time. Tyler's exposure is less, but he could face charges as an accessory." She paused. "But criminal cases are slow. They're public. They're messy. And at the end of the day, putting Victoria in prison doesn't get your money back. What's the alternative?" Patricia smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. "We go after the money. Victoria is broke. She spent everything she stole. But Desert Sun Financial, they have deep pockets. And they approved a $400,000 line of credit against your property based on a forged signature and a power of attorney that was obtained through fraud. Their due diligence was non-existent. A man your age, a property you've owned for 30 years, and they didn't even call you to verify? That's not just negligence. That's predatory lending." The plan Patricia outlined was elegant in its simplicity. We would not sue Victoria directly. We would sue the institutions that had enabled her. Desert Sun Financial, for predatory lending and failure to verify. The title company that had processed the fraudulent documents. The notary who had witnessed Victoria's signature on the power of attorney. A woman who, it turned out, was Victoria's cousin and had notarized the document without ever being in the same room with me. Each of them had insurance. Each of them had lawyers who would understand immediately the catastrophic liability they faced, and each of them would be desperate to settle rather than face a public trial. "What about Victoria and Tyler?" I asked. Patricia's smile faded. "That's up to you. I can have the DA's office ready to file charges within 48 hours of our settlement. Or you can choose to let it go. Some of my clients just want their money back. They don't want to send family to prison." She looked at me with knowing eyes. "You don't have to decide now, but you do have to decide eventually." I spent a week thinking about it. A week of sleepless nights and long walks through the desert, watching the sun set over the mountains and wondering how my life had come to this. My son was dead, my wife was dead, and now my grandson, the boy I had loved and trusted, had helped his mother try to steal my future. I thought about David. I thought about what he would want, and I realized that the answer was complicated. David had loved Victoria once. He had loved Tyler with all his heart. He would have been devastated by what they had done, but he also would have wanted me to survive. He would have wanted me to protect myself. And sometimes protection means cutting out the cancer, no matter how much it hurts. The meeting was held in Patricia's conference room on a Tuesday morning. Victoria arrived first, looking confused and annoyed, like she couldn't understand why she had been summoned to a lawyer's office. Tyler came with her, his jaw tight with barely concealed anxiety. Then came the lawyers from Desert Sun Financial, two men in expensive suits with the pale, strained look of executives who had just realized their careers were on the line. The representative from the title company, the attorney for the notary's insurance provider. They filed in one by one and took their seats around the long mahogany table. I sat at the head, with Patricia beside me. I watched Victoria's face as she took in the scene. I saw the moment she understood. The blood drained from her cheeks. Her mouth opened, then closed. She looked at Tyler, and I saw him shrink in his chair like a boy caught stealing. Patricia didn't waste time. She placed a binder in the center of the table, thick with evidence. Bank records, forged signatures, text messages, security camera footage, the investigator's report. 4 months of fraud, laid out in black and white. "This is a courtesy copy of the lawsuit we will be filing tomorrow," Patricia said, her voice flat and cold. "Unless we reach a settlement today." The next 2 hours were a blur of negotiations, threats, and desperate bargaining. The lawyers from Desert Sun caved first, agreeing to cancel the entire debt and pay $200,000 in damages. The title company followed, offering another $100,000 to avoid litigation. The notary's insurance company contributed $50,000 and agreed to refer the case to the state licensing board. When it was done, when the documents were signed and the checks were promised, Patricia turned to Victoria and Tyler. The room went silent. "My client has chosen not to pursue criminal charges at this time," Patricia said, "but that choice is contingent on certain conditions. You will have no further contact with Mr. Bennett. You will make no attempt to access his accounts, his property, or his personal information. You will sign a document acknowledging your participation in this fraud." She paused, letting the words sink in. "If you violate any of these conditions, the district attorney has been briefed and is prepared to file charges within 24 hours. Do you understand?" Victoria was crying. Tyler wouldn't meet my eyes. They signed the documents with shaking hands and left without a word. That evening, I sat on my patio and watched the sunset paint the desert in shades of gold and crimson. The money would be restored. My credit would be repaired. My house was safe. By any objective measure, I had won. But victory felt hollow. I thought about Tyler. I thought about the boy who used to sit on my lap and listen to stories about his father. I wondered when he had changed. I wondered if it was the money, the desperation, or something darker that I had never seen. I would probably never know. I learned something in those terrible months. I learned that love and trust are not the same thing. I had loved my daughter-in-law, loved my grandson, and that love had blinded me to the truth. I had signed away my protection because I wanted to believe that family would never hurt me. I was wrong. Now, I check my accounts every week. I review my credit report every month. I read every document before I sign it, no matter who hands it to me. These are not the habits of a paranoid man. They are the habits of a survivor. Trust is not something you give freely anymore. Trust is something that must be earned, maintained, and verified, even with the people you love most, especially with the people you love most. If you're watching this, if you're someone who has handed over control of your finances to a family member because it seemed easier, because you trusted them, I want you to hear me clearly. Check your accounts tonight. Pull your credit report. Make sure you know exactly who has access to your money and your identity, because the people who hurt us most are rarely strangers. They're the ones sitting across from us at the dinner table, smiling and asking us to pass the salt. What would you have done in my position? I'd like to hear your thoughts. Leave them in the comments below. And if you haven't already, subscribe to Gilded Vengeance for more stories of betrayal, justice, and the long road to reclaiming what's rightfully ours.